Thank you for being here. If you've ever gotten an email from me, you know that it ends by saying local Washington is only as good as the people active in it. So thank you for being here and to listening to our elected official from Ward 4. We do welcome you, Mark and I do. We're going to have a free-flowing conversation. It's not a League of Women Voters grilling. It's not 60 minutes. It's just, who is this person sitting over there to my right? You are invited to write a question on the 4x7 cards that we were passing out. But when we had Tommy Wells here, we had more manifestos than questions. I'm just telling you right now, I'm not reading manifestos. I'll be reading simple questions if you write them down, because I'm in TV and we keep it simple. Now let's see. Where's the timer? There she is over there. This is an hour uninterrupted. It's being recorded for the Hill Center. It's being recorded for NBC Washington, and it's being recorded for DC 50, the station on which Mark has his own talk show. So there'll be a lot of coverage of this. Good. Particularly if you say something outstanding.
Newsworthy.
So let's please welcome Muriel Bowser, Ward 4 Councilmember.
Thank you.
And the first question I get is, do you know you have the same initials as Marion Barry?
Yes. I call him MB1. I'm MB2.
That's it, but over to Mark, who's drinking water already.
Wow, Tom's first question went much better for Tommy Wells.
We asked him why he was called Tommy.
I heard.
He talked for like 4 minutes.
But keeping in the theme of getting to know Muriel Bowser, particularly here in Ward 6,
Sure.
Obviously you're probably better known in Ward 4 than Ward 6. Why don't you go ahead and tell a little bit of people, I remember being at your campaign kickoff on the front steps of your parents' house, and you were surrounded by family, and you talked about growing up here in Washington, D.C.
Absolutely.
Tell us a little bit about your family roots here in Washington.
Sure. Well, my family's been in Washington for 5 generations. My parents are both DC public school graduates. My father graduated from Armstrong Senior High School, at the time a technical and vocational school, and my mother from Cardoza. My father grew up in Leadroyd Park in the 100 block of Thomas Street Northwest, and I had the pleasure recently to knock on his childhood home, on the door of his childhood home. My mother grew up.
Who was there?
They went home, unfortunately. Nobody was there. But my mother grew up in Foggy Bottom, and I often say when it was the bottom. And so they really raised us, as 5 of us kids, with a sense of growing up in D.C., getting a great quality education, going off to college, and coming back home to make our city a city that we can be proud of. So I grew up in Ward 5 near Providence Hospital. I'm the youngest of those 5 kids, and I really had a strong sense of being in public service and giving back to our city. My parents were 2 government workers. My mother's a nurse, and my father worked over 40 years in the DC public schools, and they made the decision to send us all to parochial schools. At the time, they didn't think that the schools were serving our family well, and they made a lot of sacrifices so we would have a great education. I went to a women's college in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, called Chatham College, and we have a fantastic. I don't know. Are you from my alma mater? All right, see? At Chatham, it's a great focus on the liberal arts. I studied history. And then I decided, maybe I would go into the private sector for a bit, and I did. Right after school, I worked in insurance in Philadelphia. And State Farm, in fact. And I actually liked State Farm quite a bit, but I realized that the kind of the corporate world and moving around and, chasing, the next ladder up just didn't suit my interest or passions, and really public service did. So I decided to go back to school, and I did it full time. Came back home to American University, where I studied public policy. And while at American, I not only knew that I wanted to be in public service, but I knew that I wanted to be in local government. I got a job in Montgomery County. It was supposed to be an internship, but it turned into the full-fledged thing. When Silver Spring, and some of you will remember what Silver Spring used to look like, downtown Silver Spring, it had not sprung. So we spent a lot of time really focused on how to transform that downtown, make the transportation systems work. And I worked in the transportation department when I started there. And then I ended up working the downtown development office, where I really fell in love with transforming downtowns and serving the neighborhoods that surround them. I realized then, and I know I'm talking long, so feel free. Yeah, I realized then that Montgomery County was going to be okay without Muriel Bowser. It was a lot of good things happening in the county. It's a big county, a lot of best practices. I served there under just a fantastic executive. And I realized then what an executive with a vision and a lot of energy and the willingness to put his entire political capital behind that vision could do. I worked for Doug Duncan. And he will be on the Kojo Namdi show this Friday at noon. Everybody wants to tune in. Good. Tell him
Doug
I
Duncan.
said hello. And so he got it done. And I realized then that local government was where I'd be. So while I was in school, while I was working in Montgomery County, I decided to buy a home in DC, and that's when kind of my political life started.
Let's go back to the high school just for a moment, because you said your father was a DC Public Schools worker for 40 years. You went in Bladensburg to the Elizabeth Seton High School.
I did.
How did you get there?
Well,
did their parents take you every day, or was it a bus? Or?
No. My first high school was actually in Silver Spring. It was called the Academy of the Holy Names, and it closed. And back in those, that would have been the late 80s, Catholic schools were having a tough time, and our school closed in the 10th grade. And so then I caught the Metro every day from Fort Totten to Silver Spring to get to school. And by the time I was at Seton, I was driving, and I drove to school.
One more history question. Why history in college?
I love
something from high school, or just
yes,
something?
I always was attracted to government, civics, and history, and I'm fascinated by the history of our country and learning about that history and learning how that history impacts the decisions that we make today.
And you mentioned Riggs Park.
Yes,
How many people know where Riggs Park is? Few. Tell us something about Riggs Park.
Well, Riggs Park is really
Where it is first.
First of all, it's a great American neighborhood, and it's a great DC neighborhood of really working class folks, mostly duplexes that were built in the 1950s. It's on the top of the city. It borders Prince George's County. Our closest metro station is Fort Totten, and it's being transformed, of course, as we speak. It's a neighborhood of a lot of retirees and now young families. I think that it's among the best values in DC. Great quality neighborhoods, great housing stock, and people can afford to live there. I bought a house there in 2000 for $125,000. And it was among the best decisions that I have ever made in my life. And that's where I still live.
What's it worth now?
It's probably worth something more than that.
Park.
So you're swimming in equity.
Yeah, I'm doing okay.
I think I recall, I'm meeting you for the first time when you worked for Adrian Fenty's campaign. How did you meet Adrian Fenty? How did you forge that relationship with Adrian Fenty?
Well, I volunteered for Adrian Fenty's campaign.
Without knowing him personally?
No, I knew him. I was at that time an ANC commissioner in my neighborhood. I ran twice for advisory neighborhood commissioner. So my approach in buying...
Did you win twice?
I did.
2004 and 6.
Indeed. That sounds about right. It was kind of easy because I don't think I was opposed at least the second time. So they were easier races than this one. And I met Adrian because, he was my council member. And literally, anytime we had a need in that community, he showed up.
Did you support him when he ran against Charlene Drew
I was
Jarvis?
just moving to Ward 4 in that race. Actually, it was over. He was the council member elect in 2000 when I moved in.
Did you know Charlene? Do you know Charlene Drew Jarvis?
I know her well. She is the second. Well, there have been 4 Ward 4 council members. I'm the 4th, and 2 women. And she served with distinction on the council for 20 years. And she was also a very powerful chair of the Committee on Economic Development. And I chair the Committee on Economic Development. And so we very definitely, I have called on her from time to time for advice on issues affecting the ward and development.
When you ran for the ANC for the first time in 2004, how did that come about? Well, actually, did you get your full enough question on?
I didn't completely
I did.
answer. Oh, you got it? Okay.
Yeah, we got enough.
All right, good.
For now.
Yeah.
So what was it that you said you wanted, I think you told the Washington City paper, you wanted to be a public administrator. You envisioned yourself, excuse me, running an agency or something like that. What was it that said, okay, I'm going to run for elective office as an ANC? Those ANC jobs can be nightmares with the people who are demanding
Right.
a lot of your time and issues.
Right.
What made you decide to be an elected official?
Well, I will tell you, somebody, even to the question, why am I kind of sitting in this chair asking you to vote for me for mayor on April 1st? And I am asking you to vote for me for mayor on April 1st. And probably it started with a desire to make a good neighborhood great. And if I want to be really specific, it probably started with junk automobiles on private property. Anybody know about that? So I could walk in an alley in Riggs Park, let's call it my own alley. I have a Y-shaped alley, and count 20 junk automobiles in people's backyards. That's when I decided the government could do better, and leaders who wanted to make neighborhoods better could step up and do something. So the ANC certainly was an opportunity for me to do that. And getting around the ward, when we did work on, I did work on Adrian's campaign in 2006, so I was a volunteer coordinator for volunteers. So you could get to all the neighborhoods in Ward 4, see the various needs, and also in working closely with my council member then, see how the elected official could make things change so quickly. I saw it with Doug Duncan, and I saw it with Adrian Fenty. So yes, I always knew that I would be in government, and I thought that running an agency would be splendid. But really, at the sitting on the council and being able to impact the budget, being able to oversee the agency directors and make sure that they're doing just what the council and the residents want, you can affect change faster.
People don't, before we leave the personality aspects, people don't know you real well on some things because you're a ward council member. But I took this down from your speech, your re-election inauguration speech.
And you're going to pull that up right away on your device there, Tom, for
Yes,
us?
I am, but it's now disappeared. Here it is.
That'll be fun. What do you want to know
wanna take
about
the
the
short
speech? I'll tell you.
No, I think we're just going to play it and just see how it goes.
I've confirmed a few things about myself, and I've learned others. I know I'm a daughter, sister, aunt, now a godmother, boss, lawmaker, and friend. I'm fiercely competitive, practical, and loyal. I love steak dinners, Jay-Z, the B-52s, and Nirvana. And like most Washingtonians, I really miss Chuck Brown. I've confirmed.
Did you know Chuck Brown at all? He's a big fan of Chuck Brown.
All right.
This could get into very deep territory here. I just want to pass by it. But I'm going to come back to that in a moment
Sure.
about you introducing yourself more
Yeah.
to the whole city. But
Yep.
Chuck Brown was somebody who really had an impact in the city, but a lot of people did not know him or his music.
Oh, well, I certainly knew his music. I wasn't lucky enough to call him a close friend or associate. But what I saw in Chuck Brown, in what a lot of people saw, is just a joyfulness about Washington and a joyfulness about our native grown music. And I think that he exemplified a lot of, a person who changed his life and provided a lot of happiness to people in DC.
Do you have any comments on Chuck Brown?
I don't. You did mention that you're a candidate for mayor. While this is not a mayoral forum, there is a question I like to ask at forums like this of the audience. How many people here are undecided as how they're going to vote on April 1st in the Democratic primary?
Nice.
All right, a lot of opportunity.
In Ward 6.
For you. So let me ask you,
I noticed.
You mentioned Ward 6. Let me ask you a little bit about Ward 6 and stay with that, some softballs here.
Okay.
What's your favorite thing about Ward 6?
Oh, I love Easter Market. I would say I'm a big fan of Matchbox on Barracks Row. And I love the variety of neighborhoods in Ward 6. And I just think that Ward 6 kind of exemplifies a lot of change in DC, but also a lot of staying the same. So I really like that about Ward 6. I do think that this is just provides a lot of variety for people to stay in their neighborhoods, be served by the various amenities, but it's still, you have that neighborhood feel that people know each other and talk to each other and go visit with each other, and it's a good neighborhood.
You know, you have been working to redevelop George Avenue in Ward 4. Is 8th Street here on Capitol Hill a model, perhaps? You said the other night 14th Street, Jack Evans threw 14th Street as an example, and I think you pretty much shot that down for George Avenue. Is 8th Street a model? 8th Street, Southeast.
8th Street
Barracks Row
is a model.
8th Street.
8th,
Eighth.
the number 8.
Okay, so H is not.
As opposed to H.
Okay.
I think there are good things certainly in both, and I think on 8th Street on Barracks Row, I think it's a model not only for Georgia Avenue but even more closely in our ward, Kennedy Street, kind of small, compact streets that the size of the investment has a big impact. Now, Sharon Ambrose and I had this conversation because, you know, she was very instrumental in making sure that what Barracks Row looks like today, she had the opportunity to really push as the Ward 6 council member and the chairwoman for economic development. So we talked just about what those streetscape investments meant for Barracks Row. Now, I know some of the pressures on Barracks Row now as the rents increase and the neighborhood serving retail gets pushed out. What do we do about it? That's what Capitol Hill residents talk to me about. They don't just want bars. Now, we all like restaurants, and I think this is some of the struggle that we have on H Street right now, is where's the variety? People want to be able to go to the cleaners. They want an eyeglass shop. They want a bicycle place. But frankly, the restaurants are making so much money that they're the only ones that can afford the rent. So I think as we think about economic development, we can't just think about the big guys and the big city projects. We also have to figure out what it's going to take to support small businesses that serve our neighborhoods.
No, you've been on the council, before we get into the mayoral parts, you've been on the council since the special election of 2007.
Yes.
You were one of like 19 or 20 candidates, right?
Yes, 17, I think, yeah, something like that.
It was enough.
Yes, a lot.
More than you could have at a forum. Who came in second? I don't remember. Do you remember?
Michael Brown.
Oh, he was in the news last week again.
About that campaign, actually.
Yes,
you might
I
remember.
know.
Yeah.
But we'll get to ethics in a few minutes, and
Okay.
then Michael Brown can be the poster boy for that. I wrote my column about him this week, the crook. But
I'm going to keep track of the shameless self-promotions that Sherwood drops in randomly.
my news. All right, but go ahead. But it's on the council, 13 members. No matter what you believe in, you've got to get at least 6 in a normal vote to go with you, and sometimes 9. What can you tell us about your council service, things that you think are your best achievements, and maybe in a different fashion, some things that you didn't do as well as you wish you had?
Well, I just have had so many experiences on the council. We've learned a lot. Now, you'll know as a ward council member, you wear a lot of hats. Your hat in leadership in your ward and making sure that the agencies are delivering for your ward and projects are moving. That's one hat. But the other hat is to go down to the council and pass laws that fill the gaps in our system and make sure we do that. And I feel very proud of the work that we've been able to do in that regard. So I've chaired the Committee on Consumer and Regulatory Affairs, on government operations, short time with Parks and Recreation, and now economic development. I will say that my skills as a legislator were most tested when we had these ethics crises in our city, where we had a mayor under investigation, several council members under investigation, and the public literally losing faith in its leadership. Everybody on the council wanted a piece of legislating something. So we spent the time that we needed to spend really looking at what the problems were and what the bills were in front of us and coming up with kind of a bold next step, I think, to move the city forward. Now, everybody had an opinion about what should be done, and I thought it was very necessary, and what we did was step back to make sure we had a solution that would work. And I have to tell you, I decided to create a board of ethics and government accountability, like many states have across the nation, an independent agency with independently appointed members that would have to judge, investigate, and enforce our code of conduct for all public officials, our employees and council members and the mayor.
How's it doing now?
It's doing great. I think that probably some people will tell you it's doing too great because they have to answer to it. And we've had, in its short existence, 3 members have been investigated and a penalty has been levied against them for breaking the code of conduct. But more than that, the message has been sent across the government that there is actually a sheriff in town. Before we had a board of ethics, when all of this stuff happened with Suleiman Brown and Vince Gray and this accusation and the other, we had the Attorney General punt on it. We had the Inspector General punt on it. We had the Board of Elections at the time, Board of Elections and Ethics punt on it. All of the agencies pointing fingers at each other. No one taking the responsibility to investigate the matter, which left our U.S. Attorney. We say we want self-determination, but we wouldn't investigate our own issues and left it to the U.S. Attorney. So now I think that message has been sent across the government that it's not, these investigations won't go away. They won't be interminable. They won't happen in a vacuum. It's going to be public accountability for public problems.
The council killed the Attorney General for this year, to elect an Attorney General who also could do some investigations of the powers. What was your view on whether we should have an elected Attorney General?
Well, as you know, I supported it out of the council, and so the council sent a recommendation to the voters, basically, and I supported having an elected Attorney General out of the council, and the voters ratified that council recommendation on the ballot. So we're going to have an elected Attorney General. Now, have there been some issues that have come up since the time we passed the law and the voters affirmed it, and now? I think the answer is yes. We have to figure out how we're going to actually implement having an elected AG to make sure that the elected AG has the legal staff that it needs, and the mayor, whoever the mayor is, has the legal staff that she needs. So that's going to be something that has to be figured out. And so, you know, that's one issue that I have some trepidation about, but I am committed to making sure that we craft the law in such a way that all of the legal needs of every entity are met.
But what about the larger issue for many people here is that the voters went to the ballot box overwhelmingly and said, we want to vote for an elected Attorney General, and we want to do it on this date that we all had come to agree on. And then the 13 members of the DC Council decided that you knew better, and that those voters weren't ready, or the system wasn't ready, something wasn't ready, and so you overturned the will of the voters. I think 80% of the voters voted in favor of having this elected Attorney General. So aside from the fact of the AG issue, what about the larger issue of the council overturning the will of the voters?
Well, I think the council, in a way, overturned the will of the council, okay? It's the council that sent the elected AG to the voters. The voters didn't have a ballot initiative that they went around and collected signatures to get this on the ballot. That didn't happen. The council sent it to them. So if there's fault, it's fault in that we didn't get it right in the first place. And we sent it to the voters when it wasn't quite right. And since then, we haven't gotten it right. So what I would ask is, yes, I think that the voters very definitely affirmed what the council sent there, and we're going to honor that. But it would be irresponsible for all of us to not have all of the sides of government in a legal framework that protects the city.
How about going forward, rather than waiting 4 years and having an election in 2018, why not have the Attorney General in the off year, say 2016? And that some people have just said the council members don't want another competing sphere of power in the city government. That's one.
I think what the law says is that the AG and the mayor cannot be elected in the same year.
No, well, they
No.
would have been this year, 2014. If it had been the election, we would have the mayor and the Attorney General.
Yes, there is a, and I'm not remembering why, but in 2014, so it would have been that they should be elected in the same year. So one could not be Attorney General and run
Hammer the
for
mayor.
mayor.
Oh. Well, let's go to an easier subject.
Okay. You tried to trip me
Something
up.
that we know about.
Marijuana.
Yes.
There you go.
Well, first of all, since it's an informal, we're just talking. Have you ever tried marijuana?
You know, I've been asked this question,
Yes.
so I probably don't need to be asked again. No, I'm
I don't
kidding.
recall your
You
answer.
don't recall the answer? Yeah, I've tried it. It was a long,
Around the
long
room for
time
the
ago.
panel?
Yeah, we're not going around the room. But let's talk about marijuana.
Maybe another show of hands.
Let's talk about the vote the other day in the council on decriminalization. A lot of people are saying that the council backed off the original, well, they did back off the original program. A lot of people are calling it that the bill was watered down, that now it's only going to be decriminalized for possession or use in the home. When the vast majority of the people arrested are actually arrested out on the streets, it is still going to be an arrestable offense to be smoking marijuana on the streets. So, one, did you shift your position on that? I don't recall what your position originally was on this. Well, let me just start there. Did
Right.
you shift your position on this? Did you originally support the bill that would decriminalize both use and possession in public and in private?
I've always had concerns about public use, and I support it coming out of committee. I'm on the Public Safety Committee, but I put a marker in the sand about this public use issue. The problem with the bill as it was presented to the committee and later to the council was that we would treat smoking marijuana in public less severely than we treat drinking in public. That doesn't make sense. And I think that we have to deal with the issue of the enjoyment that everybody in this room who may not choose to smoke marijuana have of public parks, public sidewalks, public buses, public bus shelters, and the like. And do they want to have to be around marijuana smoke?
So let me go back to my question about the will of the voters.
Sure.
Recent poll shows, I believe, more than 70% of district residents favor legalization of marijuana. It's quite possible that could be on the ballot very shortly for voters to decide. If the voters of the District of Columbia go to the ballot box and vote to legalize marijuana, and you are mayor of the District of Columbia, will you enforce that? Will you sign off on that, or would you seek, if the council did, to overturn that?
I would support it.
That's a simple enough answer.
Reluctantly?
I would be concerned about public use of marijuana in any case, and I think that we can look and we'll see how other states who have legalized marijuana are dealing with it. But I don't remember if it was Washington or if it was somewhere in Denver. Somewhere in Colorado, but there was kind of a gathering, right? It was a festival, and the police were handing out just reminders to folks about public consumption. I don't know that the residents of the District of Columbia want to have big festivals and where a park is taken over in DC where everybody's smoking marijuana.
Maybe we could vote on that.
I don't know about that. So I would continue to have some questions about public use. Now, the legalization, and some people will be surprised that I feel this way because, I can be kind of stricter on these types of issues. But to me, what we've said with legalization, we have a problem. We said you can possess small amounts of marijuana, but where are you going to buy it?
You're talking about decriminalization.
Decriminalization. Right. So I think that...
Should people be allowed to grow it?
How are you, if it's not a crime to have marijuana, you got to buy it, you got to get it somehow.
That's a crime.
And that's the crime, to buy it. And so I think we have to be very careful, and our police chief has cautioned us to be very careful about encouraging illicit marijuana sales. So that's something that I think that we're going to have to deal with and deal with very soon at the council.
I want to ask an audience question because it was the first one and it's actually very short and to the point. So it was well done, you. And it's about truancy. Truancy, we know, is a problem in DC public schools. Under a Bowser administration, how would you deal with truants, and how would you deal with where students go if they're suspended from school, out of school suspensions?
Well, I think we've already done something that is going to have a big impact on truancy, and I learned it on the campaign trail, and we were going to talk to families in Ward 8, and family after family told me that their school had been closed, and then the other school had been closed in the next round of school closures, and they were picking up their families and going across town to school, and was costing them $30 per month per child. Sometimes those kids didn't make it to school. And not a behavioral problem, but a real problem of how they were going to travel to school. So we introduced Kids Ride Free on Metrobus. I did, and I got it funded working with the council and Chairman Mendelson last summer. And last fall, kids began to ride free on the Metro bus. And so we know that not only is that going to...
Excuse me, how is that done? Is there a special pass that they
There
get,
is a special pass.
down?
So right now they're using their Flash Pass, and soon they will all be using a DC-1 card that they flash on the bus, and the city will subsidize that ride. And so we know in the suburbs, they're the big yellow buses, right? Kids ride free to school every day. But that hadn't been the case in the District of Columbia. Now, when we had walkable neighborhood schools, it wasn't as big an issue. But when kids are leaving their neighborhood, they have to get on the bus to go to school. So this is a real practical solution. Now, what do we do with the other truancy issues? And I think that we very definitely have to hold our chancellor accountable for making sure that there's a plan to make sure we know where the kids are in the first place, work in partnership with our police officials to work with families to get kids at school. Now, I do think that we need to do as much as possible to, if there is a suspension or a behavior issue, to deal with the children in school. Now, we have some alternative schools where there are real behavior problems and kids that need very special attention. And we have to do those better as well. One thing we can't do is throw away the kids. The system has to figure out a way to deal with kids no matter where they are.
Let's do a couple of quick Ward 6, since we're in the graces of Ward 6 there. The Virginia Avenue. Incidentally, this is a violation. The The Ward 6 tunnel, CSX wants to dig up Virginia Avenue and put a double-decker trains through there, high-speed trains and maybe dangerous freight trains. Why not just have the city, like the mayor stood up to the Congress about closing the government down, why can't this city government say to CSX, you have to find a different route?
Okay. I think that we have to look at all of the options with the tunnel, and safety is among the biggest. Now, I live in a ward where freight goes through our ward, and certainly we all want access to goods, and we all know how old the tunnels are and the infrastructure is. And so not only do we have to think about the CSX tunnel, we have huge infrastructure investments that this city is going to have to make just to keep up with our growth. So we know we're going to have 200,000 more residents here. We know we have to invest in Metro. We know we have to invest in affordable housing, PEPCO, and water and sewer. And the freight rail system is no different. It's going to require the investment. So what I would really want to do is work with the community and CSX to figure out how we are going to do it in the most disruptive, least disruptive way possible.
I think they're already working on
they're
the most
working on that
disruptive way.
already. But more than that, I think what types of goods that are moving through the city have to be a big concern for everybody, and figure out if we can make some changes, and especially dangerous cargo that they carry. We don't want that carrying it that close to residences and neighborhoods, and figure out what we can do differently.
Well, another simple subject, the soccer stadium. The mayor has announced a fairly complicated deal to build a soccer stadium across South Capitol Street from the baseball stadium. Given the controversy about the baseball stadium, have you had a chance to look into what the mayor's proposing for the soccer stadium, and where are you on that?
Well, we expected the mayor to send us a deal to really look at. So I know what they're proposing and what they've talked about, but I don't think that they've reached an agreement with the property owners there on Buzzards Point or with the team. And so until we have a real deal to look at, I think we should all be careful, and we should all hold all the members of the council accountable for this. Demand this. Don't rubber stamp anything until you've actually seen the deal. And unfortunately, I think a lot of rubber stamping has been going on about that deal. I'll tell you what I'm concerned about. I'm concerned about a land swap. Where we basically say, okay, developers, we're going to come up with a price for your land, probably up here. And then we're going to come up with a price for our land, somewhere down here. And then we're going to swap. Well, that don't make sense for the taxpayers. So what you do when you want to sell your house, you don't try to figure out somebody to trade something with. You ask other people what they would pay for it. And that's the value of the Reeves Center. So I want to make sure that if we move forward with a soccer stadium, and I will say there are a lot of differences with the baseball stadium. Number one, people really like DC United, and they've been good neighbors, and I think that they, and we want them to grow in the city. But let's figure out how we get the type of deal that works for all DC residents.
We could talk
Have
about
the Lerners not been good neighbors?
We really love DC United.
I want to pursue that some more, but we don't have that much time. We got a lot of things to talk about. So I want to go now to the Washington football team, the Washington Redskins, some would call it. There's still continuing talk. Tony Williams, Adrian Finty, and Vincent Gray have all said they would work with the owners of the Washington Redskins to work out some way a deal for that team to pay for a stadium at RFK. Where are you in that? And, again, there's no set thing, and it may not happen for a decade, but where are you in the thoughts of discussions of that?
I think that Washingtonians would like to see their team back in Washington. And I think, frankly, that's the only way they're going to be a winning team. I do.
You agree with Jack Evans on that? You know, he says there's a curse, and until the team comes back, it'll have a
I think he might be right. Now, I think talking about that huge campus, residents around Ward 6, they want a more thoughtful kind of approach to it, right? So I don't think that people say, oh, we don't want the Redskins back. But what they say, well, it's been vacant a long time, you know, that all of that area around it. What can we do And let's get some big thinking people to look at that campus, include a stadium, or maybe not include a stadium. In either case, what could it be and how could it better serve our neighborhoods? Folks want more recreation space for the neighborhood. And I think that's going to be important for us to look at. So what you'll learn about me is I'm not one of those pie-in-the-sky politicians, okay? So we're not going to put all our eggs in the basket of Washington Redskins coming back to Washington. But what we need to do is have a more comprehensive vision for that campus.
I think we'll get to the questions in here in the mayor's race. Now that we've talked a bit about your service as a public official, the city paper last year did a story about your campaign, and I think it was Alan Suderman wrote it. Sorry, I don't know what's wrong with my throat here. Anyway, somebody was quoted in that story that's saying, if I were building a candidate for mayor, you can't do better than Muriel Bowser.
Nice.
Chuck Thies, campaign manager for Vincent Gray.
Nice.
Where are you? How are you different from Tommy Wells, David Catania, Jack Evans, Vincent Orange, Andy Shalal as your candidacy? If you could just say 2 or 3 sentences of why you think your experience, your outlook on life is different and better than theirs.
Well, I think for where our city is and where our city is going, that I have exactly the right experience. I think that one of our huge challenges moving forward is how we grow our city together. So you will hear me sometimes talk about the two Washingtons. People always think I'm talking about the haves and have-nots. What I'm really talking about is the Washington that, is kind of my father's Washington, and the Washington of our future. Because that's kind of where the big chasm is, as I see it, that we're kind of struggling to be the Washington that we're going to be, and we have to bring everybody along with us. So I think that I have that perspective of having lived here most of my life, but also having the perspective of what we need to catch up with the growth of our city in terms of public policies, but also in terms of leadership. So in so many ways where there are so many differences in our city, people really do, at the heart of things, want the same things. They want great school choices, safe neighborhoods. They want their children to be better off than they were and have great opportunities in this city. So our campaign is definitely going to be about bringing the city together, speaking to Washingtonians who've invested here and been here for 5 decades, but Washingtonians that have been here for 5 minutes. And both of their perspectives are important to the Washington that we're going to be in the future.
This might sound like something of a mean question, but I want to ask it because someone said it to me. They said that you are a quite personable person, you're friendly and all that, but on the council, you have several of them say you're very similar to your predecessor, Adrian Finty, and that you don't pal around with them.
Thank you.
No, this is, they say, in a negative way, and that you are aloof and you don't really kind of get joined into the camaraderie that often results in legislation being molded. And what type of personality do you have when you deal with the other council members? Can you talk? Is there any friend on the council? Is there any bitter enemy? No.
And everything that we need to get done, we get done on the council. So we had almost unanimous. I don't think your council members supported our ethics legislation, but
to be tougher.
Well, okay, near unanimity with ethics reform. We did Kids Ride Free when we passed foreclosure reform in the District of Columbia, vacant property. All of these big issues that have impacts on neighborhoods and a lot of people were very definitely unanimously passed at the council. So my job is to go down there and fill the holes in the law.
Well,
not to pal around.
Like Governor McAuliffe in Virginia now is trying to get all the Republican members drunk at parties every night after work and breakfasts and stuff. But there is a collegiality that goes with getting legislation passed in any legislature.
Yes.
Sharon Pratt Kelly found she couldn't get things done because she treated people differently. Adrian Fenty found it that way. Even Tony Williams had to overcome a certain shyness to get things done. Just wondering, do you think there's a part of your personality where you don't want to mingle with the people that you need to vote for things?
No, absolutely not. Actually, I think I do quite a lot of mingling and making sure we're reaching out to colleagues. I have the habit, for example, because we're in this technological age where everybody calls or texts or email. When I want to meet or have something to discuss with a member of the council, you know what I do? I get up out of my chair and I go to their offices. Whenever we have events in our ward or they have events in their ward, I try to support them as well. But more than that, Tom, I have spent the last year really trying to decide what is my relationship going to be like as mayor with the council. And I had a bird's eye view of what happened with the council and Adrian Fenty. And so I have very deliberately decided that we are going to work with the council, set a big agenda for the city, and see what the council's agenda is, and work very cooperatively. I have enjoyed a great relationship with Phil Mendelson, and he and I have actually had this conversation. And I intend to really, I have a lot of respect for what he does, but I think that's where it starts. How does the mayor respect the city council, the council of the District of Columbia, and how do we work together?
Later this week, former Mayor Williams will testify before the council on his panel that put together some recommendations on revising the tax code in the District of Columbia. So, as Mayor Bowser, are there taxes that you would increase? Are there taxes that you would expand? I mean, the Williams report will recommend expanding the sales tax, not increasing the amount of sales tax, but starting to tax things that aren't currently the yoga tax, health club memberships, services, things like that. Are there things that you would support taxing, and are there taxes, income tax brackets perhaps, that you would increase, or is there somebody looking for a tax break out here?
Well, I think that with surpluses, there's been a surplus, I think, just every one of the 7 years I've been on the council. And not little ones, big ones, hundreds of millions of dollars. So my approach to taxes is this. As mayor, and it's been my approach as council member, I don't have any problem with asking taxpayers for what we need. Right? I wouldn't even have any problem with asking you if we needed more. But I have a big problem with not spending what you give us the correct way, or having huge surpluses at the end of the year. So I do think it's high time to make sure that if there's some relief to be given, we need to give it careful consideration. So I, for example, was concerned about a high income tax bracket, creating one at a time that we were producing huge surpluses. Your council member wasn't, okay? So that's how we got it. I was concerned about putting a tax on out-of-state bonds that were affecting a lot of senior citizens who were relying on that income when we didn't have to do it because we had huge surpluses. So those, that's just is not my way to approach tax policy. If we need it, then we should ask for it. But if we don't need it, we have a huge surplus, we should let the people keep their money. So the Tax Review Commission does have a whole package of recommendations. And I want to figure out a way to have a middle income tax break. In other words, create another bracket in the middle, I think somewhere in the range of less than $100,000, more than $40,000, where their rate would actually drop. I also want to support a way to increase the standard deduction so that middle income folks can keep more of their money. I also want to find a way to be more competitive with our business taxes. Now, all of those things have a cost.
Well, that means to cut the business tax.
Yes. To be more competitive with Maryland and Virginia. So some of the things that are proposed to pay for those things, and let's keep in mind, all the people that are moving here, they have jobs, they pay taxes. So that means that we're going to have more revenue. So it's possible that we can pay for that tax relief with future revenues. It's possible, though, that we'll have to offset that tax relief with other taxes. In the sales tax on services, I'm not too keen on, but making the sales tax even with Maryland and Virginia, I think is something that we should keep on the table. Now,
So it's raising the rate to be. I've got to plead ignorance that I don't know what their rate and so they have
it's
a higher
6.
sales tax
Theirs
rate.
is higher. Ours has recently been 6. We rolled it back in the last year.
And because there was an increase in then.
There was an increase in.
So you would be open to raising the sales tax rate then, it sounds like.
I would be open to finding a way to put more money in the pockets of middle and low income people. Now, having said that, they're going to have more money on one end and they may have an increased sales tax on the other end, but it would be a trade-off. Now, I say that only as an option that if the new revenues that are coming in as we grow our businesses and as we grow our population wouldn't be enough to pay for that type of middle and lower income tax break.
You could change the Height Act and have bigger buildings, higher buildings, and get more revenue. Are you for changing the Height Act?
Well, I happen to be very fond of the beautiful skyline in the District of Columbia, and so I'm not for changing it.
Anywhere? How about places where it doesn't interrupt the skyline?
Well, it interrupts the skyline for them, for those places.
For Maryland people, what if you did it up all around? You raise it up there in Riggs Park so the people in Maryland looking down can.
I knew that's what you were getting at.
Georgia Avenue right there at Silver Spring, we just match them building for building.
Have you been to Shepherd Park? Do you think they want tall buildings in Shepherd Park?
No, I don't think they do.
Yeah,
Let me ask you a question. Let me ask you a question from the audience, and this is about DC Fire and EMS, which has obviously been in the news really for all the wrong reasons lately.
Nightmare reasons.
What would your plan be? What would you do to fix fire and EMS?
I think we need a new mayor. Okay, so we need a mayor that's going to stay focused on the most basic function of government, and that is public safety, and making sure we have the right leadership at the fire department who's going to have a culture in the department where it's unacceptable for a firehouse to not respond to a citizen dying across the street, where it's not acceptable that nobody in the entire department knows if there are enough ambulances. So we have to have a change, in my view, from the top, where there's not a culture where you can miss that type of thing. The second, let me just say this: we have to figure out in this city how we're going to kind of respond to our needs. Now, what do you think we have? More medical emergencies or more fire emergencies? More medical. Our equipment, our staffing, our approach doesn't mirror that reality. So remember those 200,000 people I said that we're going to be moving here? They're going to have more medical emergencies too. So as mayor, I think that we have to confront that reality that if we have more medical emergencies, we have to make sure our staffing and equipment training mirrors that reality, and we would make sure that happens.
What about the racial tension within the fire department? I've been in this city for a few decades, and it's always been there. Now, racial tension may be everywhere, but in the fire department, where you want people to work cohesively together, it does seem that there has been a consistent strain of racial tension.
I think you're right. And I think it's palatable. And I think, like you say, in the public safety agencies, when you have that kind of breach of morale and collegiality, people die. And we have to be very concerned about that. So I don't think it's not an easy answer to it. It's been kind of decades long in the making. But I think what's important is that we get the right leadership all through the department, that we hold people accountable, and that we have a better kind of working relationship with the representatives of the employees, the labor union.
You know, in the past 4 years, 2 people have died at the doorsteps of a DC firehouse. Andre Rutter 4 years ago in Southwest, and then Mr. Medrick Mills the other day in front of Engine 26. And what both families have now come together to say is that they want you, council members and the mayor, to change the law in the district to allow families to sue the government when they are failed in this manner. Right now, the families know they cannot sue. The public duty doctrine protects the district government from any kind of lawsuit about this, because people under that doctrine are actually not entitled to have first responders. And that is basically what that law says. Would you agree to some type of tort reform that would allow citizens to sue the government in cases like this?
I think we have to give it careful consideration. We have to, but there are probably many other tools that we need to enforce in the government right now to make sure we're holding ourselves accountable.
Let me ask you my last fire department question. Right now, the mayor and the fire chief and the police chief and at least one council member have all signed off on a plan that they call soft posting. And this is putting fire personnel in fire trucks in the middle of the night in high crime areas, sitting out on street corners simply as a deterrent to crime. The union obviously hates this. The mayor, the chiefs both endorse this. What would your policy be on this?
I think we have to make our neighborhoods safe, and I think that if fire personnel aren't being asked to intervene in a crime, they shouldn't be asked to intervene in a crime. But having a fire truck in an area that his neighbors feel unsafe in, I don't have a problem with that.
I mentioned Michael Brown earlier, the crook of taking money, and no law would have probably stopped him. But I want to go back to ethics for a moment, because Councilmember Wells, who's running this, not taking corporate monies or bundled monies. He's only taking money from individuals and who may own a business, but not corporate money. You or another council members who are running are in fact taking corporate money. And why not ban corporate contributions or the bundled corporate contributions?
Because I think you kind of point to something in your lead up to that question. There's corporate money in all of these campaigns. Now, if you want to call an individual that owns a business and say that's not corporate money, I mean, you can do that, but that's really not the case, is it? But
the difference is that what's allowed now is bundling, and that is someone who owns multiple LLCs is able to give money, in many times in an anonymous way. You can't always track back that money, or it's often more difficult to, particularly for the average citizen, to find out who's actually giving you that money, who is really behind those donations. So it's not so much trying to silence a developer or somebody. It's simply trying to put accountability and sunshine on who's actually giving these donations.
Is bundling going to be limited in the 2015 going forward? There's some change, but I can't remember now what it was.
Well, the LLCs, and I hesitate to call it bundling, because bundling to me means some guy or gal goes out there, invites all their friends to support a campaign and bundle the contributions. I think you refer to saying a lot of LLCs that give. We passed campaign finance bill, I guess, in the last several months that would make it perfectly clear that affiliated LLCs could not give more than one contribution moving forward.
Okay. After this election.
Moving forward, yeah.
Yes, I had to ask Anacostia Rivers nearby here. The people are quite worried that Anacostia, despite some efforts, despite the bag tax, despite other things, more needs to be done. Do you have any thoughts specifically about environmental safety?
Well, I know that our waterways have to be a top priority for us, and especially when I spend time in Ward 6, and all the development that's going on around our waterways are not just certainly enhance our neighborhoods, but they can be a real economic development driver, and there's so much more that we can do along our waterways. So,
have you ever taken one of those boat rides down from the top of Anacostia down?
I've been on so many boats along the Potomac and Anacostia in my lifetime, yes. And my brother now has taken up rowing on the Anacostia, and so he gives me some feedback as to what it's like day to day. So whatever we need to do to speed up how we clean up the Anacostia is going to be important. So we have all of these big EPA-ordered projects. We have our own projects to make sure that we're not spilling as much waste as, putting as little waste as possible into our waterways. We have our neighbors that help pollute our waterways too. That we don't have all that.
You could sue Maryland. For
Yes,
stopping.
I don't think they're paying their fair share of what they're doing to our waterways, and so I think there is a lot that we can do. And certainly, and somebody asked me recently, so which agencies are kind of getting it right in the government? Certainly not everything. You wouldn't change everything, and that's the case. I do think that there are agencies in the government that have come up with innovative ideas, and I think I hear a lot of good remarks on sustainability and Sustainability DC, and I think that we would look to improve upon them, but maintain the goals or increase the goals to get our waterways where they should be.
When I last checked your campaign finance report, you had about almost $800,000 on cash on hand with 5 or 6 weeks to go. I've gotten 2 mailings in the last week.
Good.
I've written that you're going to carpet
Haven't gotten
bomb.
any.
Oh, well, that you're going to carpet bomb. How many of these can I expect to get? 10, 12?
Well, let me just
I'm
say
an
this.
undecided voter, too.
Good. So you must. Well, we'll get back to Mark later. But this has been our approach, Tom. Now we're running a serious campaign. I promise.
But you've got a lot of money to spend in 5 weeks.
Well, we have a lot of work to do to make sure that the residents of the District of Columbia see this the way we see it. Now, there've been a lot of polls done, and certainly I trust this poll, the one that I get on people's doorsteps as we've been across the city. And what I know is this: people want a fresh start in the mayor's office, and they want to meet and get to know the candidate and the campaign that can make sure that happens.
Can you break out of the pack, all the people who are opposing the mayor? 76% of the people either don't want the mayor or are undecided, but you're all in the pack in the back. What do you do? What can people here expect to see you do in the next couple of weeks to light some fire like Shambright Kelly did when she won? She came out of the pack and won.
Well, I think that the people are deciding that as we speak. So we've been out to Ward 8 where everybody said, Muriel, nobody knows you in Ward 8. You'll never make any headway in Ward 8. And so, the Democrats held a straw poll and we won. We beat the sitting mayor in his backyard. We went to Ward 4 where we have worked very hard for 7 years, but we had an incumbent mayor that we beat in a straw poll there. Just yesterday.
Didn't get enough to get the endorsement.
We got enough to get the win, and so it's 60%.
You got more than anybody else.
We got a lot more than everybody else.
Let me ask you a quick education question. We're almost out of time.
Can't be long.
Impact, the process by which teachers are evaluated, primarily based on test scores of the students. Is that working? Do you think that's working? Would you maintain that system?
Yes. And I think that what we've heard from the teachers, I'm sorry, did I cut you off?
No, yeah,
okay.
I like a straight answer.
Yes. I'll say this. When 7 years ago, I got on the council when just after, because I was elected in May, I think the council approved the mayoral takeover of the schools in April. And I think one of my first votes on the council was for the new school's chancellor. And in that time, we haven't gotten everything right. We really haven't, but we've gotten a lot right. The heavy lifting of school reform, in my view, has been underway for 7 years, and we're seeing improvements. Not fast enough, not wide enough, but we very definitely have moved the ball. So we've invested a lot in our buildings. We've invested a lot in our people, and a great contract for our teachers. But part of that contract is all the adults are being held accountable. So I think that the chancellor might tweak some things here and there to make sure that the evaluation is broad enough, and that the teachers have the opportunity to correct any deficiencies. But I think accountability in our schools is very important. Thank
you very much for being here for this Hill Center
Is it
conversation.
over?
It's already over.
That was so
We're about a
fast.
minute or two over, I think, and I wanted really to talk about middle schools, which is the chief battleground for the schools.
You bet.
Next
And we have a plan.
We'll do it again if you are continue to be the council member or whatever you end up being. Thank you for being here tonight.
All right, you got it.
Muriel
Thank you,
Bowser,
Ward
ladies and
6.
gentlemen.
Thank you, Hill Center.
Mark Segraves, Tom Sherwood, thank you guys for coming.